Mr. Carter was a busy man, always moving from one meeting to another, always surrounded by phone calls and business deals. He had built his wealth from the ground up and now lived in a big, beautiful house on the edge of the city. But despite his success, there was something missing in his life, something he didn't want to admit. He was a father, but not really present. His wife had passed away during childbirth, and since then, everything had felt cold and quiet inside the house. He had hired help, of course, a cook, a driver, and most importantly, a maid and nanny to take care of his infant son. That maid was Maria, a quiet woman in her late 20s, with kind eyes and tired hands. She had come from a poor village, looking for work to support her own family back home. She was not highly educated, but she was sharp, hardworking, and had a natural mother's touch. Maria lived in the servants' quarters in the back of the house. She woke up early each day, long before the sun rose. She would clean the baby's bottles, wash his clothes, and prepare everything he needed for the day. Then she would softly walk into the nursery, lift the baby from his crib, and hold him gently against her shoulder. The baby always stopped crying when she held him. Sometimes he would smile at her the way he didn't even smile at his own father. The baby's name was Leo, and he had big blue eyes just like his mother. Maria often looked into those eyes and felt her heart ache a little. She had lost her own baby years ago, forced to give her up for adoption when she couldn't afford to feed her. No one knew this, not even Mr. Carter. To him, Maria was just another employee, doing her job well. Days passed quietly. Mr. Carter left the house early in the morning and came back late at night. He barely spoke to Maria, only giving short instructions or polite nods. He assumed everything was fine as long as the baby was healthy and the house was clean. But he didn't see the little moments, the way Maria rocked Leo in the chair and sang softly to him in her language, the way she stayed awake all night when he had a fever, pressing cool cloths to his forehead, the way she whispered promises that she would always protect him, even though he wasn't her child. One morning, something strange happened. Mr. Carter noticed that his son cried a lot when Maria wasn't in the room. But the moment she held him, he calmed down. At first, he brushed it off. Maybe the baby just liked her voice or her scent. But the behavior continued day after day. Maria seemed to be more than a nanny. She had become the baby's safe place, his comfort, his warmth. Still, Mr. Carter was too focused on his business to think much about it. He believed love could be shown through money, through expensive toys, soft blankets, and the best formula milk. He didn't realize that babies need more than bottles and cribs. They need arms to hold them and hearts to beat near theirs. Maria, on the other hand, gave little Leo something different. She gave him skin-to-skin warmth, lullabies, and long hugs that made him feel safe. She fed him formula, as expected, but sometimes, when the baby was screaming and nothing else worked, she would hold him close to her chest, hoping the sound of her heartbeat would soothe him. She had never crossed a line, never done anything wrong, but in her heart, she had started to care for him like her own lost child. The house staff noticed it too. The cook once whispered, "That maid loves the baby more than his own father." But no one said it out loud. No one dared. Mr. Carter was powerful, cold, and rich. He paid their salaries, and that was enough. But Maria didn't care about money. She didn't even care if Mr. Carter liked her or not. All she cared about was the baby. She had found someone to give her love to again. Someone small and innocent who didn't judge her for being poor or alone. She spent every day with Leo, feeding him, bathing him, changing him, and playing with him. When he took his first step inside the nursery, it was Maria who caught him, not his father. When he said his first word, "Ma," it was Maria who cried. Though she never told anyone, she was careful though. She knew her place. She was just the maid, just the help, and so she stayed quiet. But the love between her and the baby grew every single day, stronger and deeper, like a bond that could not be broken. And then came the day that changed everything. A normal morning, or so it seemed. Mr. Carter left as usual, briefcase in hand, car waiting outside. But fate had other plans. Something unexpected would bring him home early. Something that would make him see a side of Maria and himself that he had never seen before. And when he opened that door, his world would never be the same again. The morning started like any other. The sky was clear, the air was warm, and the city buzzed with noise and motion. Mr. Carter left the house early, as usual. Wearing his expensive black suit and carrying his leather briefcase, he gave a small nod to the driver and stepped into the car. He didn't say goodbye to Maria or even glance at the nursery where his son, little Leo, had just woken up with soft cries. Maria, already awake since before sunrise, picked up the baby and gently rocked him in her arms. She hummed a soft lullaby from her village, one that always seemed to calm Leo instantly. The baby nuzzled into her shoulder. Already forgetting his tears, she smiled warmly and whispered, "You're such a sweet boy, just like my little girl used to be." After feeding him his bottle and changing his diaper, she held him close, walking in slow circles around the file room. Leo was restless today, fussy and clingy. Every time she tried to lay him down, he cried again, louder each time. Maria felt his little body shivering slightly. Even though the room wasn't cold, she placed her hand on his forehead. He didn't have a fever, but something felt off. Maybe it was just one of those days. Maria tried everything, changing his clothes, checking the bottle, rocking him harder, singing louder, but nothing worked. His cries grew desperate, and soon the little baby screamed and kicked in her arms. She looked around in panic, hoping no one in the house would be disturbed. Her heart ached. She couldn't stand hearing him suffer. Not again, not after what happened to her own baby. She looked down at him, saw his teary eyes, his tiny fists, his red face. He needed comfort, not just from arms, but from the deep warmth that only a mother's body could give, something she had once given before, something her instinct still remembered. Maria hesitated. Her hands trembled as she looked at the baby. This was not her child, she was just a maid. She had no right, but in that moment, as Leo wailed louder and her own heart raced with pain and confusion, she made a decision, one that came not from her mind, but from her soul. She sat down slowly on the rocking chair in the nursery. Cradling Leo gently, she whispered, "It's okay, it's just me, I'll take care of you." With shaky hands and a heart full of guilt and love, Maria adjusted her blouse and held the baby closer to her chest. Leo sniffled, paused, then latched on as if he had been waiting for this all along, and just like that, he stopped crying. Tears rolled down Maria's cheeks. She didn't know if they were from relief, fear, or something much deeper. She rocked back and forth slowly, feeling his heartbeat slow down, feeling his tiny fingers relax against her. This was wrong, she knew it, but it also felt so right, so natural, so peaceful. Meanwhile, downtown Mr. Carter sat in a high-rise meeting room, staring at a wall of numbers. Business was business, and money always came first. But for the first time in months, he couldn't focus. Something about Leo's cries that morning had stayed in his mind. Maybe it was the way the baby looked at him lately, not with fear, but with distance, as if he didn't even know who his father was. Suddenly, his assistant walked in and whispered in his ear, "The client meeting is canceled, sir. They won't be arriving until tomorrow." Mr. Carter blinked. "So I'm free now?" "Yes, sir." Without much thought, he packed his things and told the driver to take him home. Maybe he'd surprise everyone. Maybe he'd see what his house looked like during the day for once. As the car moved through the city, he scrolled through photos of Leo on his phone, most of them taken by the maid, not by him. He felt something strange stir in his chest, a kind of quiet shame. When the car pulled up at the house, Mr. Carter told the driver not to alert anyone. He stepped inside silently, noticing how quiet the home felt when he wasn't rushing in or out. No one saw him as he walked through the halls, guided by a soft humming sound coming from the nursery. He followed it slowly, confused. The door to the nursery was half open, and as he approached, he stopped. Something inside him told him not to move, not to speak, through the gap in the door. He saw Maria sitting on the rocking chair holding Leo close, and then his eyes froze. His child, his only son, was breastfeeding in the maid's arms. The room felt like it stopped breathing. Mr. Carter stood there, shocked, his heart pounding in his ears, his face turned pale, his hands clenched into fists. But he didn't barge in. He didn't scream, he just stared, silently unable to make sense of what he was seeing. Maria had no idea he was there. She continued to rock gently, her eyes closed, whispering to the baby in a soft, loving voice. She looked peaceful, more like a mother than a maid. The baby looked happy, safe, fed, but to Mr. Carter, it felt like his entire world had shifted. He stepped back quietly, turned around, and walked away. His footsteps were silent, but his mind was loud with questions. What had he just seen? What did it mean? And what would he do next? He didn't know, but one thing was certain: everything had changed. Mr. Carter sat alone in his study, his mind spinning. He had just seen something that left him speechless, something he never expected, something he couldn't explain. The image of his baby boy, Leo, nursing from Maria the maid, was now burned into his memory. It felt like the air in the house had changed, like something had cracked open inside him. He didn't go back to the nursery. He didn't confront Maria. He didn't say a word. Instead, he poured himself a glass of water and sat on the leather chair, staring at nothing. His hands were still shaking. He wasn't sure if he was angry, confused, betrayed, or just stunned. He thought of his wife, how she used to hold Leo, how she had dreamed of raising him with love and joy. But she had died during childbirth, and since then, he had built a wall around himself. He provided everything: money, comfort, safety, but never gave himself emotionally. He had left that job to Maria, trusting her because she was kind and quiet, and because Leo seemed happy with her. But this was something else. Was it wrong? Was it dangerous? Or was it something else, something deeper? He didn't know. Maria, on the other hand, had no idea what had just happened. After breastfeeding Leo, she gently laid him in the crib. He was calm now, sleeping peacefully. Maria smiled and touched his tiny fingers, whispering, "Sweet dreams, little one." Then she stood up and went to the kitchen to wash bottles and clean the nursery towels. But as she walked through the hall, she felt something strange. The air felt heavier, and her heart beat faster without reason. Something wasn't right. Her instincts told her someone had seen, someone knew, but she pushed the thought away and continued her work. Later that evening, Mr. Carter came down for dinner. Maria served him as usual, carefully avoiding eye contact. She felt nervous, though she didn't know why. Mr. Carter barely touched his food. He only asked short questions. About the baby: did he eat well? Any fever? And Maria answered politely, "Yes, sir, all good. He's sleeping now." Then silence. An uncomfortable silence that filled the big dining room like fog. Maria stood there quietly, waiting to be dismissed. But Mr. Carter finally said, "I saw something today." Maria's heart stopped. She didn't breathe. "In the nursery," he added, slowly, looking up at her. Her hands trembled as she held the serving tray. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "I'm sorry," she finally whispered. "I didn't mean to. I didn't plan it. The baby was crying so much and nothing worked. He was hungry, and Mr. Carter raised his hand, asking her to stop. He looked at her carefully, watching her eyes, her body. The way she stood, she looked scared, truly scared. But there was no guilt, only sadness and fear, and maybe love too. "I don't know what to say," he said after a long pause. "You should have told me. Something like this, people could take it the wrong way." "I know, sir," Maria whispered. "I was just trying to comfort him. I didn't mean any harm. I swear on my life I didn't." "Want to cross a line, Mr. Carter?" Looked down at his plate, pushing food around with his fork. He didn't shout. He didn't fire her. He didn't even accuse her, because deep down, something inside him knew Leo had never looked that calm, that safe. He had seen his son's face in that moment, peaceful and full. It was a face he had never seen before, not even in his arms. "Just give me some time," he said quietly. "I need to think." Maria nodded quickly, tears forming in her eyes. "Of course, sir. I understand. I'll keep my distance. I'll do whatever you say." "No," he said, surprising both of them. "Don't keep your distance. You've taken care of him like a mother. I can't ignore that. I just need time to understand what it means." Maria felt something heavy in her chest loosen a little. She bowed her head and whispered, "Thank you, sir." That night, Mr. Carter didn't sleep much. He walked into the nursery around midnight and stood beside the crib. Leo was sleeping soundly, his chest rising and falling in rhythm. Mr. Carter leaned down and gently touched his son's head. It was soft and warm. The baby didn't wake up, but made a soft sound, like a sigh of peace. Mr. Carter sat in the rocking chair where Maria had sat earlier. He stared at the walls, the toys, the crib, the photos of his late wife. He felt like a stranger in his own house, and maybe even in his own life. He had built walls to protect himself, but in doing so, he had stayed away from the very thing that mattered most: love. Maria had broken that wall today, not with words, but with her actions, with her instinct, with her heart. He didn't know what he would do next, but he knew one thing for sure. That moment, the moment he saw his baby in Maria's arms, had changed everything. He couldn't unsee it, and maybe he didn't want to. He just needed to find the courage to face what came next. The next morning, Mr. Carter woke up early, but his mind was still full of thoughts from the night before. He couldn't stop thinking about Maria and what she had done. He had seen it with his own eyes, yet part of him still questioned how to feel. The world would say it was wrong, maybe even dangerous. But his heart told him something else. It told him to look deeper. Instead of going to the office, Mr. Carter sat down in his private study and turned on his computer. He began to search, typing words slowly at first. Maid breastfeeding employer's baby. Is it safe for someone else to breastfeed a baby? And then, wet nursing history. As he read article after article, his mind began to open. He learned that in old times, it was normal for poor women to breastfeed rich women's babies. They were called wet nurses. It wasn't something new or dirty. In fact, in many parts of the world, it was an act of love and survival. He also found medical articles that explained the risks, but also the benefits. Breast milk could protect babies from sickness and help them grow stronger. But trust and hygiene were important too. The more he read, the more his anger softened. It was still strange, yes, but maybe it wasn't evil. Maybe it was something more human than he could understand at first glance. Still, he needed to know more about Maria, who she really was, why she had done this, and if he could still trust her with Leo. He picked up the phone and made a call to a private investigator. He didn't want to spy on Maria to hurt her. He just needed answers. He needed to know the full story. While waiting for the report, he started paying more attention. He watched Maria from a distance. How she played with Leo, how she fed him, how she wiped his nose and kissed his forehead without thinking. She wasn't acting. She wasn't pretending. Her love for the baby was real, and Mr. Carter could feel it in every small moment. 2 days later, the investigator called back. The report was ready. Mr. Carter sat down to read. It said Maria had come from a small town far away. She had been married young, but her husband left her before their child was born. She gave birth to a daughter, but due to poverty and health problems, she couldn't raise her. She had given her baby up for adoption so the child could have a better life. That decision had broken her heart, but she did it out of love after that. Maria moved to the city and worked many jobs, cleaning, cooking, even sleeping on floors just to survive. She sent money to her sick parents and looked for any job that would give her food and a roof. When she was finally hired by Mr. Carter as a maid and nanny, she saw Leo and something changed in her heart. She never forgot the baby she lost, and somehow in Leo's eyes, she saw a second chance. Mr. Carter closed the file and sat in silence for a long time. His heart felt heavy. He had judged her too quickly. She wasn't just a maid, she was a mother who had been through more pain than he could imagine. She didn't breastfeed Leo out of desire or foolishness. She did it out of instinct, out of love, out of a deep need to care for someone again. That evening, after dinner, he asked Maria to sit down with him. She looked nervous, her hands holding the edge of her apron tightly. "Maria," he said gently, "I know everything. I read about your past. I know about your daughter." Her eyes filled with tears immediately. She opened her mouth to speak, but he raised his hand softly. "You don't need to explain. I just want to understand." She wiped her tears and whispered, "I didn't plan anything, sir. I only wanted to calm him. I couldn't let him suffer. I know it was wrong to cross that line. But I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it because I care about him. Maybe too much, Mr." Carter looked at her, really looked, and then said, "You didn't hurt me, Maria. You reminded me what love looks like." "I forgot what that was." Maria stared at him in shock, her lips trembling. "You're not angry?" "I was confused," he said honestly. "But now I see the truth. You've done more for my son than anyone else, including me." There was a long pause, a quiet stillness between them. Then Mr. Carter continued, "I want you to keep taking care of him, not just as a maid, but as someone important, maybe even family someday." Maria gasped, her tears now flowing freely. "Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say." "You've already said it," he replied. "Every time you held him, every time you comforted him, you spoke louder than words." That night, something changed in the house. The walls felt warmer. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. Leo slept peacefully in his crib, and in another room, Maria finally cried, not from guilt or fear, but from relief. She had been seen, understood, and for the first time in years, accepted. Mr. Carter sat in the nursery again before bed, watching his son sleep. For the first time, he didn't feel like a stranger in his own home. He felt like a father who had just begun to understand what family really meant, and it had taken one simple, powerful moment to open his eyes. He knew the world outside wouldn't understand, not yet, but inside these walls, he had found something worth more than money: trust, compassion, and the quiet strength of a woman who had loved his son like her own. The next morning, the house felt different. It wasn't something loud or big, but a soft change in the air. Mr. Carter came down to breakfast earlier than usual. Maria was already in the kitchen, preparing his tea and toast as always. When she saw him enter, she stood straight, her hands shaking a little. She didn't know what to expect. Maybe he had changed his mind. Maybe everything he said last night was only in the moment. But Mr. Carter gave her a small nod and said in a calm voice, "Good morning, Maria." Her heart settled a little. She placed the tea on the table and stepped back. "Good morning, sir." He looked up at her, then said something she never thought she'd hear. "Please sit, I want to talk." Maria hesitated. No one in this house had ever asked her to sit at the same table. But he was serious. She slowly sat at the far end of the table, her eyes lowered, hands resting on her lap. Mr. Carter took a breath and began, "Maria, I've been thinking about everything, about what happened, about you and about Leo." She didn't speak, just listened, her heart beating fast. "I realized I've been so busy building my company, building walls around myself. I forgot how to build a real connection with my own son," he said. "And you filled that space, not because you had to, but because you cared." Tears filled Maria's eyes. "I didn't mean to take your place, sir, I swear. I just couldn't let him cry like that. He felt like my own." Mr. Carter nodded slowly. "I understand that now, and I don't blame you. In fact, I'm thankful." She looked up surprised. "Thankful?" "Yes," he said. "Leo is calm, healthy, and happy. I've seen it. I've felt it. That peace. I couldn't give it to him, but you did." Maria's lips trembled. "He reminds me of my daughter," she whispered. "The one I gave away. I don't even know where she is now. Every time I hold Leo, it's like I'm holding a piece of what I lost." Mr. Carter leaned forward, his voice soft. Tell me about her, I want to know. Maria shared the story slowly, her voice cracked. But she kept speaking. She told him about being left by her husband when she was pregnant, about giving birth in a tiny clinic with no one by her side, about the hunger, the cold nights, and finally, the moment she made the hardest choice, signing papers to give her baby up for adoption because she had no food. Number money, no help, Mr. Carter listened, not like a boss, but like a human being. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. When Maria finished, she was crying quietly, wiping her face with her apron. I'm sorry, she said. I shouldn't have told you all this. No, Maria, he said firmly. You should have. I needed to hear it. You've been carrying this pain alone for so long, and I didn't even know. He stood up and walked toward her. Gently placing a hand on her shoulder, she froze. Not used to kindness from someone like him, he said. You're not alone anymore. From that day forward, things began to change more openly. Mr. Carter didn't treat Maria like just a maid. He involved her in decisions about Leo's care. He asked her opinions, listened when she spoke, and treated her with quiet respect. The other staff noticed it too, and slowly, they followed his example. Maria, still humble and careful, never acted above her position, but she smiled more. She stood taller. She even laughed softly when playing with Leo. Something inside her had begun to heal. One evening, Mr. Carter returned home early again. He found Maria and Leo in the garden. Leo crawling in the grass while Maria followed close behind. He stood at the door watching them, something warm rising in his chest. For the first time in a long time, he felt peace in his own home. Later that night, as Leo slept, Mr. Carter found Maria in the hallway. I've been thinking, he said. Would you ever want to find your daughter again? Maria's eyes widened. I think about her every day, but I don't know where she is, and maybe she doesn't want to know me. Mr. Carter shook his head. You never know until you try, and if you want, I'll help you. I'll hire someone to search. I have the resources, Maria. You gave my son love. It's time someone gave you a chance too. She couldn't speak. Her hands covered her face as tears poured down. She had spent years hiding her pain, burying her dreams. And now, someone had opened a door she thought was locked forever. Thank you, she whispered between sobs. I don't know how to thank you enough, Mr. Carter smiled slightly. Just keep loving Leo the way you always have. That's enough. That night, Maria sat by Leo's crib, watching him sleep. She whispered, maybe, just maybe, my little girl will know I never forgot her. And in another room, Mr. Carter sat quietly, thinking not just about business or money, but about family, real family, built not by blood alone, but by love, trust, and second chances. Something deep inside him told him this was just the beginning. Something was changing, not just in the house, but in his heart, and he was ready to follow it wherever it led. Days passed, and the bond between Maria and Mr. Carter grew stronger. But more than that, something was also changing inside Mr. Carter. The man who once lived only for business was now beginning to understand the true meaning of home. He no longer left early every morning or stayed out late. Instead, he spent more time in the house with Leo, with Maria, and even with the staff he had once ignored. One morning, Leo took his first real steps, and it wasn't in front of his father. It was in front of Maria. She clapped her hands and cheered, picking him up with tears in her eyes. Mr. Carter, who had just entered the room, saw it happen. For a moment, he felt a little jealous, but then he smiled. He walked over and said, You caught his first steps. You'll have to help me teach him the rest. Maria laughed shyly. He'll run before you know it, sir. No more, sir, he said softly. Just call me Daniel. Maria paused, surprised, but nodded slowly. Okay. Daniel. That night, Daniel sat at his desk looking through old files. But this time, he wasn't reading about stocks or deals. He was reading about adoption records. He had already hired a legal team to help Maria find her daughter, but now he was going deeper. He wanted to understand how the system worked. where children went, and how to track them safely meanwhile. Maria had begun writing letters, not to send, but to prepare herself. In those letters, she wrote to her daughter, telling her how much she loved her, how sorry she was for letting her go, and how much she wished to hold her just once, even. If her daughter never wanted to see her, Maria wanted her to know the truth. Daniel noticed a new glow in Maria's face. She smiled more often. She stood taller. She even began taking better care of herself. Leo too seemed more joyful, laughing more, and always looking for both Daniel and Maria together, like he could feel the love growing between them. Then something unexpected happened one afternoon. A well-dressed woman came to the house. She was a social worker from the Child Services Department. She said someone had shared the story of Maria breastfeeding the baby, someone from the staff, who didn't agree with it and had sent an anonymous letter. Maria's face turned white. She looked down, feeling fear return. "I didn't mean harm," she whispered. "I was only trying to comfort him." The woman didn't smile. "We are not here to punish you, but we do have to investigate." Daniel stepped forward, calm but firm. "I already knew. I support her fully. My son is healthy and happy. That should matter most." Still, the social worker asked to see the baby. She looked around the house, checked Leo's health reports, spoke to the cook, the driver, and even the neighbors. After 2 days of questions, she returned with her final decision. "We found no harm," she said. "In fact, we found a safe, warm home and a baby who is clearly loved deeply." Maria cried again, this time from relief. But Daniel wasn't done. "And what about Maria's daughter?" he asked. "She's been trying to find her." The social worker looked through her files, then smiled softly. "There may be something. A young girl in the system with matching details. We can't be sure yet, but we'll help." Maria couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Do you mean you found her?" "Not yet," the woman replied. "But we're close." That night Maria stood in the garden, looking at the stars. Daniel came out and stood beside her. "What are you thinking?" he asked gently. She smiled through her tears. "I'm thinking maybe I don't have to live with the pain anymore. Maybe I get a second chance, not just with Leo, but with her." Daniel nodded. "And you won't face it alone. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Maria looked up at him, really looked, for the first time. She saw not a boss, not a rich man, but a kind heart behind tired eyes. A man who had lost something too, and now was learning how to love again. From then on, they became more than maid and employer. They became partners in something unspoken, something real. They laughed together, shared stories, took turns feeding Leo, and even began having meals at the same table. One evening, Leo ran into Daniel's arms while Maria watched. Daniel lifted the baby high, both of them laughing. Then he turned to Maria and said, "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" She shook her head slowly, unsure. "A woman who saved my child, and maybe even me." Maria blushed, covering her face with her hands. "You're too kind." "No," he said. "I'm finally being honest. The past couldn't be erased, but the future? It was beginning to look like something they could build together. A future where pain could be replaced with peace, where mistakes were forgiven, and where broken hearts could finally start to heal. And somewhere, in a quiet office, a file was being opened, one that held a name, an address, and a photo of a girl who just might be the piece Maria had been missing all her life. The journey wasn't over, but the family, it was already forming, stronger than anyone had expected, especially Daniel, who now believed in second chances more than ever. A few weeks later, everything changed again, but not because of what happened inside the house. This time, it was the outside world that stepped in. One evening, while Daniel was at a charity event and Maria was putting Leo to bed, someone took a photo from the gate outside the house. The photo showed Maria holding Leo close, sitting in the garden. The baby's head rested on her chest, and from the angle of the picture, it looked very clear what was happening. The next morning, the photo was all over the internet. The headline read, Millionaire's maid caught breastfeeding his baby's secret relationship or scandal. The news spread like fire. People shared it, commented on it, and soon, reporters were calling Daniel's office nonstop. Some people were angry, some were curious, and some were supportive, but everyone had an opinion when Daniel saw the photo. He froze, his heart dropped, not because of shame, but because he knew how cruel the world could be. Especially to someone like Maria. She was innocent, but the world would not understand. He called his office and told them to cancel all meetings. Then he rushed home. Maria was already crying when he got there. She had seen the photo too. One of the other staff members had shown her on their phone. "I'm sorry," she whispered when Daniel walked in. "I ruined everything. I didn't mean for this to happen. I never wanted this kind of attention." Daniel walked straight to her and took her hands. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said firmly. "We knew something like this might happen, and we'll face it together." But the pressure kept growing. Reporters stood outside the gate with cameras. Some people tried to dig into Maria's past. They called her names online. Some even said she was trying to trap Daniel or steal from him. It hurt her deeply. She stopped smiling, stopped eating, and tried to stay out of sight. Her heart broke again, not just for herself, but for Leo. She didn't want him to be part of a scandal. Daniel decided it was time to speak. He called a press conference. The room was full of cameras and flashing lights. Journalists whispered as he walked up to the microphone, but his face was calm, his voice steady. "I know many of you have seen the photo," he began, "and I know there are many rumors, but let me tell you the truth." He paused and looked at the crowd. "After my wife passed away, I lost my way. I focused on work and forgot how to love. My son, Leo, needed more than money. He needed comfort, warmth, and care, things I wasn't giving him," he continued. "Maria, the woman in that photo, is not just a maid. She is a kind, brave woman who stepped in and loved my child when I couldn't. When Leo was crying and no one else could calm him, she did what a mother would do. She comforted him. She did it out of love, not shame." Crowd went quiet. Reporters stopped writing, just listening. "She saved my son," Daniel said, "and I will protect her as long as I live. Anyone who tries to shame her, insults her, or threatens her is also insulting me and my family." Maria watched from home, tears rolling down her cheeks. For the first time in her life, someone had stood up for her, not just in private, but in front of the whole world. After that speech, things slowly began to change. Some news outlets apologized. Supporters flooded the internet with kind messages. Mothers around the world shared their own stories, saying Maria reminded them of their struggles. Celebrities and activists praised Daniel for speaking out with honesty and courage. But not everyone was kind. Some people still whispered behind their backs. Some neighbors looked at Maria differently, but Daniel didn't care. He hired security to keep reporters away and gave Maria full rights as Leo's guardian when he wasn't. Home one day, while Maria was walking Leo in the garden, a little girl's voice called out at the gate, "Is this the house of Miss Maria?" Maria turned, confused. A woman stood with a child beside her. The child had soft brown eyes and the familiar smile. The woman said, "This is Lily. We believe she's your daughter." Maria dropped to her knees, her hands shaking, her lips trembled. "Lily?" The little girl stepped forward and nodded. "They told me about you. I wanted to see you." Maria pulled her close, crying hard, hugging her tighter than she had ever hugged anyone before. It was real. Her daughter had come back to her. The missing piece of her heart had returned. Daniel came outside, saw them together, and smiled. He knew what this moment meant. Everything they had been through had led to this. That night, the house was quiet, but filled with warmth. Leo slept in one room, Lily in another. Maria sat in the middle of the hallway between them, tears of joy on her face. Daniel stood beside her and said, "I told you we'd find her, and now our family is complete." Maria looked at him with gratitude. "Thank you, Daniel, for everything." He shook his head. "No, Maria. Thank you for teaching me what family really means." And with that, the quiet house, once cold and lonely, now felt alive. It had become a home, not just because of walls and furniture, but because of love, truth, and the people who finally found their way to each other. The sun was just rising when Maria walked into the kitchen with quiet footsteps. She still couldn't believe everything that had happened only a few months ago. She was just a maid in a rich man's house, silent and careful. Today, she was no longer just the help. She was part of something more, something she never thought she would have again. A family. Little Leo was sitting in his high chair, happily smashing bananas with his fingers. Maria wiped his cheeks and laughed gently. Her laughter was soft, but full of peace. Daniel walked in and smiled when he saw them. "He's a mess," he said with a chuckle. Maria nodded. A happy mess. After everything they had faced, the photo scandal, the media storm, the investigation, life had finally begun to settle. The public had moved on to other stories, and the house was quiet again. But this quiet was not cold or lonely like before. It was warm, filled with love and comfort. Lily, Maria's daughter, had officially come to live with them. After some legal work and a few court visits, the adoption agency had confirmed it. Maria was her mother, and they were together at last. Lily was shy at first, but with time, she began to open up. She played with Leo, helped Maria in the kitchen, and even sat beside Daniel during movie nights. Daniel had made a promise to Maria, and he kept it. He didn't just help her find Lily. He made sure they had everything they needed. He gave Lily her own room, filled it with books, soft blankets, and glowing star stickers on the ceiling, just like any father would. One evening, Maria found Daniel in the living room, staring at an old photo of his late wife. He didn't speak, but his eyes were thoughtful. Maria sat beside him and said gently, "You still miss her, don't you?" Daniel nodded. "Every day. But I think she'd be proud of where we are now. She wanted Leo to grow up in a house full of love, and I think we finally have that." Maria placed her hand on his. Not romantic, but kind, respectful. They were two people brought together by pain, but now held together by love, not just for each other, but for the children, for the life they had rebuilt. Soon after, Daniel made another big decision. He announced the creation of a new foundation. It was named after his late wife and built to support single mothers and domestic workers who were struggling just like Maria once had. The goal was simple: give women a chance to live with dignity, protect their children, and stand tall again. Maria was shocked when he asked her to be the director. "Me?" she asked, pointing to herself. "I don't have any education. I'm not qualified." Daniel smiled. "You have more experience and heart than anyone I've ever met. You've lived the pain, and now you can help others escape it." Maria said yes with tears in her eyes. It was the first time anyone had trusted her with something so big. She started working part-time while still caring for Leo and Lily. Soon, the foundation began helping other women, sharing food, helping them find homes, jobs, and even tracking missing children. The story of the maid who became a mother was shared again online, but this time, not as a scandal. This time, people called her a hero, a symbol of love, strength, and second chances. One day, a school invited Maria and Daniel to speak about their story. The auditorium was full of young students. Maria stood nervously on stage, holding Daniel's hand. She spoke slowly, but clearly. "I was a maid. I was a mother. I was broken. But someone believed in me, and that changed everything." The room clapped, and some students even cried. They didn't just hear a speech, they felt it. They saw what kindness could do, what trust could build, what love could heal. Back at home, Leo took his first few running steps. He giggled and ran from Maria to Daniel, and then to Lily, as if saying, "This is my world. This is my family." Daniel lifted him up, laughing. "You're getting too fast for us, buddy." Lily sat nearby, drawing a picture. She held it up and said, "Look, I drew all of us, Mommy, Mr. Daniel, Leo, and me." Maria took the drawing and smiled wide, her eyes filled with tears. Not of pain anymore, but of deep joy. The kind of joy that only comes after long years of silence and sadness, later. That night, Daniel sat in the garden with Maria, watching the stars. "You know," he said, "I used to think money was the most powerful thing in the world, but I was wrong." Maria turned to him, curious. "Then what is?" He looked at her and said softly, "Love, real love. The kind that shows up in the smallest acts, the kind that saves a crying baby, the kind that brings people home." Maria nodded slowly. "Yes, it saved me too." They sat quietly too. People who had been broken, but now healed, not by magic, but by trust, forgiveness, and love. And so in a house once cold and silent, now laughter echoed. Children's feet ran across the floor, and hearts beat with hope. The story that had once shocked the world had now inspired it. A maid, a millionaire, 2 children, and a story no one would ever forget. A story of second chances, of family, of courage, and of a love that stunned the world. Not with scandal, but with grace, asked ChatGPT.